The global stage has once again been rocked as U.S. President Donald Trump announced an aggressive escalation in the ongoing trade war with China, declaring an immediate implementation of a 50% tariff on all Chinese imports. This move, sudden yet unsurprising to those familiar with Trump's economic doctrine, has sent tremors through global markets, shaken diplomatic circles, and ignited a fresh wave of debate on the future of international trade. Trump, now well into his second term as President of the United States, has long held a confrontational stance toward Beijing, and this latest maneuver reinforces his vision of America First economics in the most emphatic terms yet. In his official statement, Trump accused China of continuing its unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and market manipulation, stating that previous efforts at negotiation had failed to yield meaningful reforms. As such, this tariff hike is being positioned by the Trump administration as both a defensive measure to protect American industries and a punitive one to signal that the era of passive economic engagement is over. Markets reacted immediately. Wall Street plunged into volatility as investors tried to calculate the impact of this sweeping decision. The Dow Jones and Nasdaq dipped sharply, and Asian markets followed suit, with the Shanghai Composite suffering its worst single-day drop in months. Meanwhile, the Chinese yuan weakened against the dollar, reflecting investor concerns about reduced export activity and potential retaliation from Beijing. At the heart of the matter is the sheer scale of the tariffs. This isn't a targeted move against specific sectors or products. It's a blanket tariff covering everything from consumer electronics and textiles to machinery and automotive parts. The cost to import goods from China has effectively skyrocketed overnight, and American businesses, particularly manufacturers, retailers, and small importers, are bracing for impact. For the average American consumer, this could mean immediate price hikes on everyday items: smartphones, televisions, toys, clothing, and even food products. Critics argue that the tariffs function as a tax on Americans, as businesses often pass increased costs down the supply chain. Some economists estimate that the average household could see hundreds of dollars in additional expenses per year. But for Trump and his administration, the long-term payoff is worth the short-term pain. They argue that dependence on Chinese goods has left America vulnerable and that this drastic move will finally push companies to bring manufacturing back home or seek alternative supply chains in friendly nations. The White House insists that this tariff is part of a broader strategy aimed at rebalancing the U.S.-China trade relationship. According to trade officials, the U.S. has exhausted diplomatic channels over the past several years. Despite multiple rounds of negotiations, temporary ceasefires, and even trade agreements, China has allegedly continued many of the practices that first triggered the trade war during Trump's first term. With this new tariff, the administration is effectively declaring that the time for talk is over, and that economic leverage is now the main tool for enforcement. Trump, never one to shy away from a headline, emphasized in his address that the United States will no longer be played for a fool. He called on American companies to stand strong and prioritize national loyalty over global convenience. In his words, this is a new chapter in American economic independence. China, on the other hand, has responded with strong language of its own. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce condemned the U.S. move as unilateral, unreasonable, and irresponsible, vowing that China will not sit idly by. While official countermeasures had not yet been announced in the immediate aftermath of the announcement, it's widely expected that Beijing will implement retaliatory tariffs, restrict American companies operating in China, and possibly target U.S. agriculture or technology sectors as it has in the past. The escalation also has implications far beyond tariffs. This move signals a broader decoupling of the world's two largest economies, something that was previously discussed in theory but is now taking material form. Supply chains are already being disrupted as multinational corporations scramble to diversify sourcing. Countries like Vietnam, India, Mexico, and even African nations are being explored as alternatives for manufacturing and assembly, though none can replace China's scale overnight. From a geopolitical perspective, Trump's tariff strategy is as much about power dynamics as it is about trade. The administration views China not just as a competitor but as a strategic rival, economically, technologically, and militarily. This tariff move aligns with a broader effort to contain Chinese influence, from limiting access to American semiconductors to challenging China's Belt and Road Initiative in developing nations. Trump has also ramped up partnerships with countries like India and Japan, using the tariff as both a stick and a signal. Those aligned with U.S. trade policies can expect closer economic ties, while those seen as adversarial may face similar consequences. Domestically, the response has been sharply divided. Supporters of the president, particularly in industrial and Rust Belt states, see this as a long overdue reckoning. They argue that globalization gutted America's manufacturing base and that strong-arm tactics are the only way to force real change. Conservative commentators have praised Trump for standing firm where previous administrations, both Republican and Democrat, opted for appeasement. They believe that short-term sacrifices are necessary to rebuild American self-reliance. Critics, however, see a dangerous gamble. Economists warn of inflation, recessionary pressure, and a weakening dollar if the trade war spirals further. Business groups, especially in retail and technology, are lobbying against the tariffs, saying they will hurt profits, reduce hiring, and force layoffs. Agricultural groups are also on edge, remembering the billions in losses during the first round of the trade war when China halted purchases of U.S. soybeans and corn. Many fear that farmers could again become collateral damage in this economic conflict. Global allies have also expressed concern. The European Union and key partners in the Asia-Pacific region have urged restraint, fearing that the escalation could derail global recovery efforts following recent economic slowdowns. Some worry that Trump's move will embolden other countries to adopt similar protectionist policies, potentially unraveling decades of progress in building a cooperative global trading system. However, Trump remains unfazed. His administration argues that the global system has failed to protect American interests and that a hard reset is necessary. The president has often pointed to the massive trade deficit with China as evidence of structural imbalance and has long argued that China's rise has come at America's expense. In his words, this is about reasserting control, restoring fairness, and ensuring that the American worker is never second class again. There's also a political dimension to this escalation. With national elections on the horizon, Trump's base sees the tariff move as proof that he delivers on promises and isn't afraid to take bold, decisive action. It's a message that resonates deeply in communities that feel left behind by globalization and distrust traditional political elites. This tariff, like many of Trump's actions, is both policy and political theater, an effort to dominate headlines, define the narrative, and force opponents to respond on his terms. At the same time, the broader public remains unsure. Polls show that while many Americans agree that China is a threat and that the trade relationship needs reform, there is skepticism about tariffs as the best approach. Concerns about inflation, job losses, and economic instability temper support for Trump's aggressive posture. The challenge for the administration will be managing the fallout while convincing the public that long-term gains will outweigh short-term pain. In this high-stakes chess match, much depends on how China responds. If Beijing retaliates aggressively, the trade war could spiral into a prolonged economic conflict with global consequences. If it opts for a more measured response, perhaps waiting to see the political winds shift in the U.S., the situation could stabilize, though tensions would remain high. In either case, the era of calm, rules-based globalization appears to be fading fast.
Stay tuned for more updates on this developing story. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for the latest insights and analyses.